Well, welcome to our conversations for this week. Yes, we haven't done it for the last couple of weeks, but as we said when we introduced this environment, that we're not wanting to be held by a schedule, we're wanting to be held by the prompting of the Spirit. And the last time we gathered, we actually had Dan with us, didn't we? And it was a really fruitful conversation. So if you haven't had the opportunity to go and join that conversation, which was 2 weeks ago, and it's on our social media pages, I would highly recommend that you go and listen to that, because there was a lot of gold that came out of that conversation. And it's when we introduced this little kind of like a topic sort of that's manifesting more than what we can actually think of in that. What is it to be a disciple of Jesus? And what we're going to be focusing on is the notion that Rohan brought at the back end of last year, but is seeming really relevant for us as a community and all of us as God followers, is the slow, the few, and the deep. And last time we came together, we were speaking a lot on the slow. What does it mean to be slowed down? What does it mean to be intentional? What does it mean to actually sit there and go, well, Jesus was very slow and intentional in his approach. What does that look like in our lives? So we wanted to transition that today. We wanted to transition that from, and we don't want to be in a rush because we want to be slow, but we wanted to transition this from the slow to the few. And there's probably one thing that's probably that highlight to me, and as we were discussing this morning in regards to what we're going to be talking about on this platform, the thing that became evident was Sabbath. There's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to the importance of Sabbath, what Sabbath is for, the whole biblical aspect of Sabbath. And you brought to my attention something that Jesus actually spoke into, which was absolutely phenomenal. And there's a few things that we want to share, but we also want to be able to share about our experiences when it comes to the really important notion, and Rowan's brought this up a couple of times, is that what if God is inviting us into what we do for him comes out of a place of rest. Like our first fruits, not only of what we give, but actually ourselves comes out of a place of rest, rather than us being so overloaded because of an obligation that we have to rest, but that we actually sit there and prioritize our rest in him, in the actual proper meaning of Sabbath. That when we do step forward, we're stepping forward in his strength rather than ours. Yeah. So Jesus was walking with his disciples, and they started eating the grains. And from that, we find this here in Mark chapter 2:27. It says, just in this teaching of Jesus, he says, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even over the Sabbath. What does that mean to you? Because you're the one that brought this to my attention, and you had a lot to say in the regards of Sabbath not being a ritualistic behaviour, but rather an invitation. Can you explain that more?
It's interesting because I think with Sabbath we either think it's something outdated, that was an Old Testament thing that we don't have to really acknowledge, or that isn't a gift to us anymore, because we sort of think of, the law's sort of gone. And whilst, we don't murder people, and, we try and uphold the 10 Commandments still as a way that will lead to a fruitful life. Sometimes we forget, keep the Sabbath holy, and we go, we don't want to be religious. It's about grace. And so maybe the mindset has been, sometimes the mindset I've held in the past, is that I'm supposed to meet the requirements of Sabbath, as opposed to Sabbath and this idea of rest offering something to me, being a gift to me. And so what if it's not a law that that binds us or constricts us and our freedoms, but what if it's actually a gift that sets us free? What if this idea of Sabbath is a gift that sets us free? And I love this because Jesus actually got in trouble for breaking the law of the Sabbath.
Yes.
He broke a law that people were saying, oh, this is the law that God made and you can't break it.
Yeah.
If you break it, you're not acceptable, you're not good enough, you've got to make more sacrifices.
How holy can you be if you're breaking this?
Yeah. And he shows time and time again with healing people on the Sabbath, and here with his disciples just eating a basic human need and limitation. And in addressing that and letting his disciples eat, they got in trouble. And he flips the whole thing around and says, well, we weren't made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for us. So are we serving the Sabbath in this religious way, or is it serving us? And if so, what is the gift that we miss just by writing off this idea of Sabbath? Because until the last couple of years, it sort of wasn't in my vocabulary. I knew like sort of Sunday was a Sabbath because that's when we go to church, and maybe
for God,
try and keep it a bit more holy and sin a little bit less on that day, and these sort of ideas of Sabbath. Whereas now I realise that whilst maybe there is a time frame on it, which for me isn't actually a Sunday, because I've got a lot of other things to do on Sunday, and sometimes even when we're volunteering at church, all of a sudden that's not the Sabbath anymore.
It is. There you go. Even though you're doing kingdom work, it's still not actually setting aside of time for the Sabbath true meaning.
Yeah, you're resting, you're enjoying God. And so it's not so much that time frame what we make it, but are we receiving the gift that God wants to give us of resting?
Now here's a question, and I find it interesting here, is that do you think a Sabbath, the true meaning of Sabbath, not the ritualistic, that's God's way of saying, actually, I understand you, because he says that the Sabbath was made for you, and he understands our limitations. He understands our boundaries. He understands what our body can actually take and what it actually needs to thrive rather than survive. Do you think that this is God's way of going, hey, Rohan, I know what your body needs. And maybe the gift in that is actually letting God know you.
Definitely. And there's this sense too of maybe he knows us even in a deeper sense, as in what is it that he wants of us? And what is our true identity? Is our true identity on what we do 9 to 5, what we produce, what we make? A lot of us, we get our identity from, even if we're in ministry or we're a pastor, from this is what I do, this is who I am, this is who I help, and what do I receive back from that work? We don't do our work for no reason. Like money isn't the only thing. It gives us purpose, it gives us a sense of purpose, of belonging, of meaning to life. So what happens when we set aside in the strict sense, in the original sense of 24 hours, to actually achieve nothing? How do we feel? How do we feel when we achieve nothing?
You tick nothing off the list.
What does that say about where we get our sense of belonging and identity from? And what is God offering us in the sense of a lifeline and a gift to say, are you measured by what you do and what you achieve and what you accomplish, or are you measured by who you are apart from all of that? And can you still enjoy being with me in that?
That's a really, really awesome thought process in that. And there's something that you brought to light many times, and I love this notion. But it's just kind of made me think more of the sense, and I think I said it just earlier before, in the sense, what if God is inviting us that our first fruits come out of a place of rest? What does it mean that we're missing? Because you hear a lot of people say, oh, I've got to get up for work. or I've got to go do work. Yes, it may not be ministry work because you're sitting there going, okay, I've got to go be a school teacher, or I've got to go and work in a factory, or I've got to go and drive an ambulance, or those types of things. Does that mean because we go with a resentful heart, or we're exhausted because of everything else that we try to jam pack into our lives without actually noticing the gift that God's actually giving us? Do you think in that frame of mind that we're missing out on the gift of actually connecting with what God has placed before us in the areas and the environments that he has us, in our families, in our work colleagues, in our connections with the person that owns a shop down the street?
Yeah, definitely. And there's this sense of we almost, it can be seen, the Sabbath and this idea of rest could be seen as saying everything that's work is bad. Like we have to not work. But it's not really saying that at all, is it? It's actually we get more out of our work.
Yeah.
And what happens when we can approach something, a space, a calling, what we do with our day, any particular day, what happens if we can approach that out of a sense of knowing who we are, and what we can bring, and be released from our work and our doing, defining who we are. All of a sudden we have a freedom that we can bring. You know how they say, being a slave to Christ, and we think that restricts who we are.
Yeah.
Whereas we're a slave, we are a slave to everything. Yes, this world is a world where we become a slave to money, in the sense that, not in the sense of like I want a yacht, but in the sense that I have to go to work, I have to eat, I have to pay, I can't do anything without money. I can easily worry about what am I going to eat the next day, which is interesting why Jesus says daily bread, not weekly or monthly or yearly. There's a trust every day.
Yes, there is.
We can become a slave to relationships and trying to be enough to people. We can become a slave to what we do, to our work, because our work defines us. But what if we become a slave to Jesus? It's actually the freest you can be out of all the slaves. So maybe there's something in that, exposing what we are a slave to. There's a book written by Walter Brueggemann called Sabbath as Resistance, Saying No to the Culture of Now. And he sort of explores this whole idea of Sabbath is resisting and rebelling against the culture of today, and this idea of being a slave to something. So what if by practicing Sabbath, we are actually embracing Jesus more and more and resisting, because we're embodied creatures, like we talked about on Sunday. We're not just this idea of thinking. So what if our physical bodies have to practice something that helps remind us that we're not defined by our work, we're not defined by all, and we might have to be strict about it. And he says in here, in our own contemporary context of the rat race of anxiety, the celebration of Sabbath is an act of both resistance and alternative. It is resistance because it is a visible instance that our lives are not defined by the production and consumption of commodity goods. So it's actually a visual alternative to everyone around us, but also to ourselves.
Yeah, 100%.
I was just going to say, how do you feel if we talk about our own experience of Sabbath, how have you experienced that complete letting go of things in the past and trying to be still without achieving anything, setting time aside, and that pull back to?
It's in the position that I'm in at the moment, being a pastor and the transition that we're in at the moment as a church. It's been really, really difficult to actually sit there and get your rhythms of Sabbath and actually make that a priority, because things may come up here, there, and everywhere, and your head just goes a million miles an hour. But what I've found when I've actually stepped into that essence, the gift as we're talking, and actually slowed down and caught my breath, it's a sense of freedom. It's a sense of like, it's okay, the church and the world are going to run without me.
Yep.
It's okay. Like
Like a release.
100% it is. It feels like so that you sit there, but then being a human, and being a man, like with the personality that I have, sometimes as soon as I step out of that, I go straight back into, all right, well, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. Because if it doesn't get done, who's going to do it? So, but that's a lie. That's a lie that we tell ourselves. That's a lie that we sit there and go, well, if somebody doesn't do it, then it needs to be done by somebody. Whereas, well, exactly what you said before, what if it doesn't get done? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Well,
What are our priorities, and what do we place priorities on? And are they God's priorities?
Well, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Look, it's more and more evident that the culture of this day is actually telling us and trying to breed into us, and it's going to be even worse for our kids and our kids' kids and things like that, because the culture has changed dramatically. And in this book that I'm reading at the moment called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and I think I referred to it last time, for those that are very, very interested. Oh, the book's not really coming into focus.
It's not enough of a person to be focused on, apparently.
It's actually stated in here in his actual experience and him reflecting on the way the world's changed. And he's put some statistics in this little bit that I'm going to read out, because it's really interesting, because I was born in 1984. And just before I read this out, I can remember when hardly any shops were open on Sunday. Hardly any shops were open on a Sunday. And now you look, what shop's not open on a Sunday? And you walk into different buildings and you go, why isn't it open on a Sunday? And you sit there and the culture of what we've got at the moment is actually trying to rub out the true meaning of Sabbath and what our bodies actually need. So this is what he writes. He goes, until the 1960s, in some places, as recent as the 90s, blue laws forced businesses to close on the Sabbath. A government-mandated speed limit on the pace of people's lives. My dad, this is the author's dad, is pushing 70, and he tells stories about growing up in the Bay Area in the 1950s, and how the entire city would shut down at 6 on weekdays and all day Sundays. Nothing was open but the church. Nobody went out to brunch or to sports games, much less shopping. You can't imagine that happening in Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley, for those that don't know where that is, that's where Facebook is, Instagram is. It's over in the California region, and they say that it's a city that never sleeps. I can't. My dad still talks about what a big deal it was when the 7-Eleven came to town, the first chain store that opened 7 days a week and until 11 p.m. In one generation, Sundays evolved from a day of rest and worship to a day to buy more crap that we don't need, run errands, eat out, and just get a jump start on our work week for the week ahead. How true is that?
Yep.
It's like, even though, and I'm the same as you, my Sabbath isn't on a Sunday, but if we are filling every day with not just what is coming, but trying to get on top of what is going on in our lives, how can we actually breathe?
Yeah.
Well,
the thing is that if we're living in that, just get a jump start on the work. Like in my experience, the work never runs out. Like even if it's like my temptation on Sabbath days, whether like often it'll be a Saturday for us, and we're still definitely not experts, still very beginners at Sabbath.
Very much so.
Even in our household, when we talk about how we actually do that, and whether we set aside a full day, and sometimes we have things on Saturday, so it can't be a Saturday. But just focusing on enjoyment and being with God, being with each other, and not having to do something. There's a temptation when and I love gardening and doing things around the house, when I don't feel that pressure to do it, when I can engage in something. But then there's this temptation just to do just that little bit more or finish, if I just finish this, or then that'll be done. And I always feel there's a feeling of always being behind and not quite having everything done.
Yeah.
But then the temptation is you get that done, but then there's something else. So you never quite get to that place where you go, yep, it's all done.
Yep.
So, but what if Jesus is inviting us, and it sounds very familiar because that's the world all around us. What is it? Jesus is inviting us into a place where we can be at peace with him and at rest and be fully present, not when everything is complete and everything works out, but amongst the chaos.
Yep.
Because that's the world around us, and the kingdom is here, but not yet here.
Mm-hmm.
It's still coming. So if we just wait until Jesus returns and everything is good to rest, we'll be waiting a while.
Oh, yes, very much so. Well, doesn't it say, and it's our theme for this year, on earth as it is in heaven. So if we're waiting for Jesus to return, then are we actually living what Jesus invites us into, is to actually bring what is experienced in heaven through our bodies as vessels for others to be able to experience heaven here on earth.
Yep.
In all of our actions. Now, I was just bringing up there, just as you were speaking, that if it's that important that Moses felt that he needed to write it into the laws, and Jesus needed to speak about it, that right at the beginning of the Bible in Genesis, God even emphasizes that on the seventh day he rested. Yep. And I was just interested in sitting there going, well, why does he stress about this and sitting there going, okay, we are made in his image. He understands, he works outside of our limits, but he understands our limits as humans. He understands what the circumstances are that we are here on earth, and the parameters and the expectations that are on us as humans, and the expectations that we put on ourselves. I just found it interesting, just as you were reading, I'm sitting there going, okay, so what does God say about this seventh day, or whatever it looks like in that Sabbath, that one day of rest? And it says here, and God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy. And this is interesting, ready? Because it was the day he rested from all his work of creation. Now, we can read that in many different ways. But if he's noticed that he just needed that time just to be able to rest, not just to be able to get a breather or anything like that, but maybe to actually just sit and admire what has actually gone, to be able to breathe and go, I'm going to let my spirit and my soul catch up to what has actually gone about. What if that was the case of Sabbath?
And if Sabbath is just what we sometimes think, and it's a time to rest, like to recover from our working, then why does God rest?
Yeah, there you go.
When he's all powerful.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? Like exactly what you said. So therefore, him showing us the example of Sabbath and him resting isn't about us just recovering and sleeping and restoring our energy so we can work again. There's something more, isn't there?
Yeah,
an invitation to more that we miss because we just see it through our human eyes.
So here you go. A lot of people misunderstand Sabbath. What does a Sabbath day look like for your family and you?
What does it look like?
What does it look like? Because we sit there and we go, we have to do certain things on Sabbath. And if we don't do these certain things, like if we don't, we can't eat grain like the disciples and things like that.
But what is the rule?
100%. So what does a Sabbath look like for the Geddes family?
I think it looks different a lot of the time.
Yeah, good.
So I think the thing in my frame of mind is keeping the space free. So every now and again we'll do lunch or something with someone else on a Saturday, but quite often, more and more as we explore this idea and talk about it, we like to leave that space. So we might do something as a family or go out, but it's so easy to just fill in the weekend. We already have stuff on the Sunday, so easy to fill it in. And a lot of the time it's good motives, catching up with people or seeing how people are. But if we're never encountering God, spending time as a family, we have nothing to give others.
Yep.
So learning, and this is something we're learning to reprioritize that time. And so for me, like on a Sabbath, and sometimes it ends up being sections of days through the week, if sometimes the stuff's on Saturdays, church things or different things, and we have to go, okay, what does the week look like now? Where are we going to get that? And sometimes it's not a whole 24-hour period, but more and more I'm thinking we have to become more and more structured and intentional in setting that time aside. Otherwise, it just slowly disappears. And it does again and again every week for us. Like, how do we actually save and protect that time? And for me, the thing I love experiencing on a Sabbath is there's no pressure to do or achieve anything. And I can not feel bad about not having. I often do, but I go, what's that about? What's God inviting me into in the transformation space? Why am I feeling bad about not achieving something? Maybe it's because I measure myself too much on what I do. And so to be able to get up and there's not this guilt from maybe just waking up slowly and, cooking pancakes with the kids. We can go for a walk. We can be spontaneous. We can do what we want. We can organise an adventure and go to a lookout or do something fun. And, enjoy the things we like to enjoy, but not being specific. It's not just in places that we can escape or, just watch a movie marathon or so there's this sense of enjoyment and delight, but potentially maybe looking beyond just places that we go into, the veg out box or the,
where
just numb and mute everything.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, is that where we can sit there and numb what's actually gone on the week before, what the week's about to come. And that's not what Sabbath's about.
Yeah. And more I've explored this idea. So there's the personally, but then also as a family. But personally, as I've explored spending time with God, and what does that mean? It's changed more from the past where I saw it as it needs to be at least 15 minutes and needs to include reading the Bible and needs to include this and this.
Ritualistic,
And I've let go of that a bit more to be, where am I feeling an invitation to? And then some mornings, like I would set aside, I think setting aside a time, like it's very easy for it just to disappear. So we do need some sort of structure, but even that can be flexible. Again, it's not ruling us. Our rest and our Sabbath and our time with God doesn't rule us. We don't serve it, it serves us. Same as what Jesus just said. But in that, there's so much versatility. Sometimes I've just felt like God invited me to go up a hill and sit. Sometimes, going for a ride, going for a run, taking the fishing rod and going down by the river. So there's different invitations. Sometimes it is just sitting and reading, full chapters of scripture. Other times it's reading a book. But as I'm willing to be freed in that more, I actually sense the delight of God in just being with and enjoying, this sense of enjoyment. But as soon as we make it, I have to do this, I have to do that. What's the difference from the everyday life? I have to go to work. Now I have to have Sabbath.
It's a schedule. I have to do this on my Sabbath for it to be actual Sabbath. I don't think it was ever created that way, was it?
No.
And we as humans need to put, the Sabbath only looks this way. And I love the way that you said, the more and more that you guys free up the day is I think that's the whole thing. So, and finishing up, because we've only, I don't want to go too much longer, but if somebody, because I remember when I first started experiencing Sabbaths, I actually sat there and I questioned. I was sitting out on our deck having a coffee in the sun, and I've gone, am I supposed to do this on Sabbath? Like, is it like just enjoying God? And I'm like, wow, this is good. Like just sitting here and just being and things like that. But a lot of people that haven't actually stepped into the realm of Sabbath, what's one piece of advice that you can give somebody that might be intrigued in actually stepping into this area of resting in God? Just one simple piece of advice.
I think it's it's just a slow process, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
changing a huge mindset for the way things work.
What we've been taught and the culture
Yeah.
says, and
Yeah. So for me, I would just say it's an invitation into a lot more, but just one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So even the sense of we might say, why don't you practice Sabbath, or why don't you try practicing Sabbath? Some responses might be, and there's been some of my responses in the past, I don't have time.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot of the time. I don't have time to do that.
Yeah. So, okay, let's unpack that. Maybe God's inviting us to unpack. Why don't I have enough time?
Yeah.
Is it because I commit to too much?
Yeah.
Is it because I don't know how to say no to people because my worth's in what I
don't know my own limits?
Yep. And I don't want to acknowledge my limits because I feel too human when I acknowledge my limits.
The world's going to fall apart if I don't do what I need to do.
I'm the center of my world. Everything revolves around me.
Yeah.
It's up to me. If I don't do this, or my family won't get looked after, or if I have time, that means I need to take a day off work, which means I won't be getting that income from that.
Yeah.
And I want to look after my family. Okay.
So is there trust issues?
Where's the trust in God providing?
To actually know that I'm being obedient to what God is actually calling me to do, inviting me into, and He will hold the rest.
Yeah. So it's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like so much under the surface here. And I think that's why God's given it to us as a gift, really, because there is so much, there's so much that gets exposed when we just stop. Yeah. And that's why I think silence and solitude, embracing Sabbath, we talk about it, but actually doing it and actually making those decisions and actually going, okay, like today, right? Most of us just work 5 days a week, pretty long hours, and then it might still feel like it's not enough financially, so we try and do a bit more. But where is God asking us to choose our priorities and go, priority might be family, spending time with the kids, and going, what do I have to arrange and change in the way I live to make an allowance for that? So just embracing Sabbath has brought all that up for me and going, where am I going to put my priorities and where am I going to trust the rest to?
So lastly, and I just want to touch on this, is that Sabbath looks different in different seasons of our life as well. So we may have young kids, whereas Sabbath will look completely different to us than it would be to a retired couple or to young people that might be just still finding out who they are in that sense, or even ones that have older kids that they go off and do their own things, and there's other requirements that they need to do. So Sabbath is different in different seasons of our lives. And if we're not actually asking the question, where is Sabbath in my life, then I don't think we're actually being attentive to our schedules, our schedules of what is expected of us, our schedules of what is required on us. And then here's the big one as well, bro, is that if we're not being attentive to our surroundings, then how do we actually know our limits? How can we be attuned to our limits? And how can we actually be attuned to what God's doing and inviting us to, like you were saying before? Is that being attentive to that invitation?
It's all an invitation, isn't it?
It is. The Bible is a full thing of invitation, isn't it? All right. Well, look, this is going to be a continued discussion, as I said to you before. Probably the next one that we do, we will be speaking more on the few. What's the importance of the few? And that doesn't just necessarily mean a few people. And we'll go into that a little bit more next time. But thank you so much for joining us. If you have any comments, questions, or if you just want to get involved in the conversation and you haven't been able to do that live, make sure that you post a comment or contact us via email. We are sure that we will get back to you as soon as we can. But thank you so much for joining us. Other than that, have a great week, and we'll see you throughout the week.
See you guys.